pull it up real quick.
Okay, cool.
Just for quick reference.
You're good. All right, man, let's get it started. 3,
Yep.
2, 1. The New Orleans Saints get set for their second division rival this upcoming Sunday as they take on the Falcons in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Joining me to talk about that and a lot more, it took me over a year to get this dude on the podcast. It's the host of Locked On Saints. It's Ross Jackson. Ross, the patience was worth it. Good to finally have you on, my brother.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm glad to be here with you. Excited to break it all down.
Yeah, man, we've been loving having to work with you guys. You guys are doing a great job over at the Locked On Network. It's not just you, it's many others that I've covered, from college football to basketball to the MLB and NFL and beyond, brother. So we love what y'all have going on. So
thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Absolutely, brother. So let's go ahead and talk about the season that has been so far for the Saints. And the first 2 weeks of the season were things that you never would have thought seeing from a Saints offense. We didn't know what the offense was going to look like. We knew that the defense was going to be back stronger than ever, like anything else, like it has been the last 3 years. When you looked at the first 2 weeks of the season, what was the biggest thing that struck to you? Was it, other than Derek Carr's improvement, was it how Alvin Kamara looked like his old rookie self now that he's finally healthy? What else struck you whenever you looked at this offense?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was how quickly the team meshed with its new offense. I mean, this is Derek Carr's 7th offensive coordinator change, 8th different offensive coordinator, had one OC twice when he was in Vegas/Oakland. And, typically for a guy that's gone through that many OC changes, that many offense changes, that many head coaching changes, all those things, that ends up having a pretty big impact on a player to try to keep everything kind of in, the perspective of like what it is now and what he's doing now. And the fact that he and the New Orleans Saints offense as a whole was able to kind of figure it all out and get out there and be able to produce to a historic level, 91 points over the course of the first 2 games, the second most for any NFL team in history. That's pretty big. And so to me, that was the most surprising thing.
When you look at Klint Kubiak's resume, obviously the son of Gary Kubiak, we know the offensive work that he did with the Broncos and with the Houston Texans. He makes ordinary quarterbacks look like superstars. I mean, look what he did with a guy like Matt Schaub in Houston. I mean, he made him into a perennial Pro Bowl quarterback. And now it does help when you have guys like Andre Johnson and Arian Foster in the backfield. But if you combine those 3 factors together, you've got a recipe for an offense that can really take over the NFL. And so that's what you're starting to see a lot as well with this New Orleans Saints team. You're seeing a lot of Alvin Kamara finally getting involved with not only just running the football a lot more, but also getting the football out in the space, especially. You could just take the running back label off him and just label him as an athlete. Chris Olave starting to get a lot more touches. Rashid Shaheed should be in for a breakout season. I think he may have an opportunity to go over 1,000 yards this year, just because the number 1 and 2 guys have been Shaheed and also Chris Olave. So how far can this team go now that we've seen them in their first 3 games? I know it's still kind of early to see what their ceiling could be, but where do you see this team being when we get to the end of January?
Yeah, that's all going to be dependent upon health and attrition. I think those are kind of the 2 biggest things, and they were the 2 of the biggest question marks for New Orleans. They're very thin depth-wise when it comes to offensive line. There's a drop-off in talent going from starters to reserve there. Defensive line is another place where we had big questions for them. And look, against Philly, right? I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles were able to run the football late in that game in a way that ended up kind of decimating the way that we look at the New Orleans Saints, or at least changing the way that we look at their run defense. And so I think those 2 things are going to be, or those 3 things rather, are going to be the most important things for them. It's all going to be about, can they stay healthy, which so far, if you take into account training camp and then now you get into the season, they haven't shown a great propensity to stay healthy. We've seen offensive line injuries all around the NFL like crazy, though. So it's not just the Saints, it's kind of the league. right now. So you have to be able to manage that attrition and then being able to stay strong on your offensive and defensive lines and win within the trenches, which is something that this team hasn't been able to do over the course of the past few years. So those are the big question marks coming into the season. Those are still the big question marks if you ask me right now. I think that the biggest thing that ends up kind of helping you circumvent all that is Klint Kubiak, New Orleans Saints offensive coordinator, and his ability to be able to adjust. How do you adjust without your starting center in your lineup for 6 to 8 weeks? How do you adjust with your starting right guard potentially out for, however long Cesar Ruiz is dealing with his knee injury, so on and so forth? How do you continue to build a run game in a system where you're relying on a reserve offensive line? These are all big questions that the Saints are going to have to answer. So very tough for me to say where they're going to be by the end of the season. But if they're able to answer all of those questions, they're a playoff team. If they're not able to answer those questions, they're not.
Do you think if they're not a playoff team for the 4th straight year, is this the nail in the coffin for Dennis Allen?
I think it depends upon what the style of the end of that season looks like. If we're talking about the 2 games that they've won or the only games that they win, then yeah, I think that ends up being that way. But if you have, another 8-9 season or a 9-8 season and just missed the playoffs and the only thing that held you back was health, then I think a lot of these guys should expect to get another run in 2025. My expectation is that it's Dennis Allen, it's Derek Carr, it's Klint Kubiak, it's Joe Woods. It's all the same in 2025 as it is here in 2024 moving into next season. That's my expectation right now, unless something catastrophic were to happen and things were to fall apart and the wheels kind of fall off at some point.
We were in the press. I don't know if you were, but I was in the press conference this past Sunday whenever I heard Derek Carr speak about the loss of Eric McCoy. He says it's a next man up mentality. And of course it is. I mean, it's always like that. But it's very hard to mix up your offensive line. You put in Lucas Patrick at under center. You get him snapping the football a couple of times. You could tell he just looked uncomfortable being at that center role because it's something that you harp on in practice about that. But in going up against a guy like Jalen Carter, who looked like a man possessed in the middle of the field, I mean, he took over the interior majority of the game. So when you look overall, I think this interior of Atlanta is not the same as Philadelphia's. I mean, Philadelphia, all likelihood, will be in the postseason when we get to the month of January. Do you see is this a game for New Orleans where you look at this and say, this is an opportunity that we can have to improve, show out on film that we have improved on the offensive line, especially in that guard and center area?
Yeah, I don't know that it's a place where you say that you've improved on your offensive line because you still don't have Eric McCoy, right? So the idea of improving on your offensive line is probably null and void. But the thing that I think that you would be looking at in this situation is, can they navigate a game plan with a hurt offensive line, right? Can they navigate adversity? Can they navigate attrition? I think those are the things that you're really trying to prove for the most part. And Atlanta is a good matchup. I mean, Atlanta from a pass rushing standpoint has the second lowest pressure percentage for any team over the course of the first 3 games of a season since 2018. They're abysmal when it comes to the pass rush. And so do you give them a pass rush? Do you gift them a pass rush? Or can you have them play the way that they have played all season so far through the first 3 games as the lowest pressure percentage in the NFL right now at number 32 overall? And so I think that becomes a big piece for you is when you maybe struggle to run the football, can you pass the football because you have the opportunity to get time with a pretty bad or poorly performing, at least, pass rush over on the opposite side? I think that's what the New Orleans Saints kind of have to prove in this game more than anything else, is that they can navigate their adversity, they can navigate the attrition, and they cannot create a pass rushing opportunity for a team that has not had a pass rush so far. I think those are the things that you're really looking for New Orleans when it comes to their offensive line. And then from that point forward, it's just, can you get healthy on the line? That way you can get back to where you were weeks 1 and 2.
Ross, when I looked at Derek Carr the first 3 games of the season, you look at the first 2 and he just looks so comfortable in the pocket. And that goes to tell you what a healthy offensive line can do. But there are still some plays where he's still hesitating to throw the football. Is that something he's got to get used to just getting the football out quick, or has that always been a Derek Carr attribution?
I think that there's examples of Derek Carr being risk averse throughout his career, I'd say. But in this offense, he just seems so free and open in terms of being able to deliver the football. I mean, he took several 20-plus yard shots downfield to Chris Olave. He took a pair of 20-plus yard shots down the field to Rashid Shaheed. Some of those were caught, some of those were not. I think that for the most part, a lot of what ended up kind of steering the Saints the wrong way when it came to the passing game against Philly was the pressure. I mean, you look at most of the passes that Derek Carr threw that ended up going incomplete, you can see at least 2 defensive linemen in the backfield. So I think that probably more so had the bigger impact. The Saints didn't really help him out by moving the pocket or getting the quick passing game going for him. It was a lot of still waiting for things to develop, trying to play to the identity of what won them football games the first 2 weeks. It's not a bad choice, but you got to be willing to it. You got to be ready to adjust and everything. And especially in a game plan where Philadelphia is stacking the line of scrimmage with 6 defensive players on the line and then 1 overhang linebacker. That's perfect slant territory, quick in, dig territory, all those other things. And under Klint Kubiak, the Saints have targeted the most in-breaking routes or targeted in-breaking routes to the largest, to like the greatest frequency of any team so far this season. And so it was there for them. Just for whatever reason, they didn't move into that as quickly as possible. But I would imagine that in this game, they'll come in with a little bit more of a quick passing mentality, a little bit more of a maybe move the pocket mentality, and trying to play this game in 11 personnel, march 3 wide receivers out there, still be able to run the football. That way you can kind of control that heavy defensive front that Atlanta might be looking to replicate from Philadelphia.
Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints. You can also check out more of his work over at LouisianaSports.net. They actually follow me on Twitter. I just had an interview with Matt Moscona not too long ago, but they've got some great work going on over there. You can check out him. Chris Mahler does some SEC work, and then Hunt Palmer does some LSU work as well. Also check him out on WWL TV. Let's talk about the defense for a little bit because, I mean, that's probably been the strength so far. You've seen greatness come from the offense that's consistently improved. I mean, this is nothing new from the defense. And when you looked at them on Sunday, I think that was the peak form. Apart from giving up the big plays down the field, especially on the last drive of the ball game, that's what really hurt them at the end of the day with overrunning on the counter play that eventually led to the go-ahead touchdown for Philadelphia, the wheel route that they got picked on the second-to-last offensive drive for Philadelphia. But apart from that, when you get 3 turnovers and a blocked punt, that speaks volume, and that just goes to show you why the Saints are consistently a top 10 defense in the NFL since the Dennis Allen era began there. I mean, it just speaks measures to me about what a defense needs to do, what they're consistently being. And I know, and look, I think the biggest thing is that Tyrann Mathieu kind of got a bit of, I wouldn't say hate, but he underperformed at times. Not really the last 2 years, but this year he's just playing on a different level. You're seeing a lot of the old Honey Badger that you used to see in Arizona and at LSU. What have you seen so far from the defense-wise that has struck out to you?
Yeah, I mean, Tyrann's a great place to start. 4 takeaways in his last 4 games. If you go back to the Philadelphia Eagles game in Week 18, I think that the Saints defense is exactly what it is that you expect them to be. It's an excellent defense. It's a Dennis Allen defense. It gets the ball back to its offense. It gets off the field, like along with the turnovers that they generated, including that block punt. They also walked Philly off the field on a couple of 4th downs, including sniffing out a really impressive play by Pete Werner, New Orleans Saints linebacker, when they sniffed out the fake, tush push, the fake tush push that tried to go to the outside. Pete Werner and Chase Young collapsing on that over on the outside part of the left. I think that the thing that gave the New Orleans Saints trouble is that they were just the 4th team since 2019 to lose a game after forcing 2 turnovers and blocking a punt with this loss. And a lot of that came down to, some of those late push kind of scores, but also
plays.
And 7 explosive plays given up. If you define explosive plays by runs of 15 plus or more yards or passing plays of 20 or more yards, the Saints gave up 7 of those in this game. And so I think that that's another thing that ends up being a little bit of the story up against Philadelphia, but that hasn't been the consistent part of what it is that the New Orleans Saints have done. They've consistently not given up those plays. They've consistently put pressure on opposing quarterbacks. They've consistently taken the football away. So I think those are the things that really stand out to me. I think that there's a little bit of what's being asked of the offense right now is week 3 a fluke or was week 1 and 2 a fluke is kind of being maybe transposed on the defense unfairly. I think we know what's a fluke when it comes to this New Orleans Saints defense, and the typical consistent display for this New Orleans Saints defense has been excellent play, and I think that that's what we'll see throughout the majority of this season.
Alontae Taylor, 3rd in the NFL in sacks from the defensive back position. I mean, that just tells you what DA's done to disguise coverage, bring the safety down, walk them from about 10, 12 yards out, bring him down, get him one-on-one against an offensive tackle. You know he's too fast for that offensive lineman to get his hand out there. He's worked with many pass rushers. He's worked with Cam Jordan. He's worked with Chase Young. He's worked with Carl Granderson. Holy cow. I mean, that's something you rarely see. 3 sacks in one game. I know he's had half a sack since then. But do you think that the consistent pressure is going to be kept up throughout the rest of the year?
I think they'll continue to go to him in these situations. I mean, I don't think that they would go away from it at any point. I think that, you'd like, and you're seeing it from Carl Granderson and Chase Young, who each have 18 generated pressures according to Next Gen Stats, which is tied for number 3 in the NFL right now. Both of them, they're right behind two guys from the Houston Texans, Danielle Hunter, as well as former LSU Tiger, and then of course Will Anderson, former Alabama Crimson Tide member. And so I think that, like, in company with those guys on the defensive line, yeah, you'll probably see Alontae Taylor still be called upon every now and then to kind of generate pressure. We haven't seen a lot of that as of Demario Davis, who has 6.5 sacks in each of the last 2 seasons, career high and tying his career high. And so maybe they're replacing a little bit of that productivity through Alontae Taylor in some ways, or it's just that's what's working early on in the season. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, look, I think Alontae is an impressive player. He's a ridiculously composed and calm player out on the field. And this is kind of a new perspective of his game that he's really excited about. I asked him if this is something that he, considered when he was, working on, becoming, a slot corner and all these other things. And he kind of responded by saying, like, it wasn't a big piece of what he had thought about, but it's something that he's enjoying right now. So I don't think New Orleans will go away from it for as long as it's working.
I've noticed a lot. It's not just Alontae Taylor. Tyrann Mathieu walk down and come on blitzes a lot. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that they're going to implement a lot during the season. Walking a safety down, bring them through an A-gap, either delayed blitz, send the backers back and let that safety come on running free, or they're going to put them out on the edge and put them in a 5-tech or a wide 9 and try to get them off against either a tight end or a opposing offensive tackle. Alvin Kamara,
not entirely different than what they did last year, right? They did the same stuff with Tyrann last year. They did it with the safeties. Typically, they're just kind of now adding sort of the additional wrinkle of it coming from the slot, which I think is kind of the big thing, because you walk a safety down, you got to stack that safety with another safety over the top. It becomes a dead giveaway that, okay, well, that person's blitzing and then that person's going to be kind of covering that spot. You don't have to do that with a slot corner, so it allows you to disguise it a little bit more, which I think becomes the sort of asset that's worked out for New Orleans so far when you can get Alontae Taylor around the edge from the slot.
Alvin Kamara's contract situation, I think this is the last year of it, is it?
Yes, technically.
So you mentioned about it in week 1 against Carolina. Do you think that's playing on his mind right now? If he has a breakout year, do you think he does hit the market? And if there's another offer given to him, do you think that he's willing to go take that? Or is it too much of a liability just knowing what's been going on throughout his injury history and so on and so forth with other teams?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask Alvin Kamara, he either wants to be a Saint or he wants to be on his couch watching football. So I don't know if necessarily the idea of going over to another team is going to be really all that appealing to him in terms of what it is that he's expressed thus far. Now, you could say that some of that is lip service, some of that is just player talk and things like that. That's fine. But at the same time, he doesn't have to say those things if he doesn't want to either. You know what I mean? And so I think that when it comes to Alvin Kamara, I don't think that the contract is weighing on his mind at the moment. I think for him, he's been very clear that the contract didn't get done. He's not worried about it. He's here to play. He's here to be on the field with his teammates. He doesn't see any kind of contract dispute as being something that is worth coming in between him and his teammates, him and his coaching staff. His teammates and his coaching staff have nothing to do with contract negotiations. That doesn't have anything to do with Dennis Allen, doesn't have anything to do with his running backs coach, doesn't have anything to do with Klint Kubiak, his teammates, anything like that. They don't take part in any of that stuff. And so he kind of draws a line in between those two things as a separator. And so for him, all he's worried about is going out there and trying to help the team win. That's been his attitude so far. And certainly he's a big reason why they've won 5 touchdowns over the course of the first 3 games. That's 1 fewer than he had in the entire 17-game season last year. So I think that if it is weighing on his mind, the only thing that should be weighing on his mind is maybe the money running up.
Couple more questions for you, Ross, before we let you go, brother. When you look at this upcoming game against Atlanta, what is the biggest thing that you want to see that the Saints can either improve or continue to build upon as they go into the month of October?
Yeah, rebound, right? It's about what we talked about earlier in terms of managing adversity and managing attrition. Right now we don't necessarily know who this New Orleans Saints team is, and that's not in a, they lack an identity way. I think they very much have their identity figured out, but we've seen 3 games of this new look offense so far. So who is this team really? I think they have to answer that question. And it's going to be tougher to answer that question in week 4 than it was in weeks 1 and 2, because they're dealing with attrition, they're dealing with injuries, they're dealing with unavailability, all those things. And so their ability to be able to navigate that adversity, I think, is the thing that speaks the loudest volumes in terms of what it is that this team can prove to be going into or running through this season. The fact of the matter is that their schedule gets a lot easier pretty quickly within the next couple of weeks. And so the Saints are able to get this win, go up to 3-1, head to Kansas City 3-1, potentially exit that 3-2. They're in a really, really good space to be 3-2 coming out of those first 5 games, because they have a pretty easy schedule up ahead of them, aside from a pretty tough Christmas Eve game against the Green Bay Packers that'll be coming up. So I think that that's the biggest thing for me. Just prove that you can manage the adversity, prove that you can navigate this, make adjustments. That's going to be the biggest thing. And then for the defense, it's all about being who we already know that defense is, but maybe showing a little bit more reliability in terms of stopping the run. I think that would be the other big thing that you still want to see improvement from last year.
Last one for you, Ross. Looking at the spread, are you kind of a gambler guy?
Not so much. I understand it very well, though.
I got you. I'm about the same way. Looking at the over-under, it's 43.5. The spread goes to Atlanta at 2.5. Do you expect this game to go over or under?
I might say over in this one. I was surprised last week came in under. Scoring around the NFL is down, but the New Orleans Saints scoring is up. I expect that they kind of get a little bit back on track. I don't know that they're a 40-point per game team. I don't think that's sustainable or realistic, but I also know that they're not a 12-point per game team either. So I think they're somewhere in the middle, and I think Atlanta is too. So I would expect these two teams to be in the 20s by the time that this scoring is over, or at least one in the lower teens and another one in the higher 20s.
Ross Jackson, Locked On Saints, joining us here on 4th and Forever. Ross, thank you for your time, brother. Where can we find you on social media?
You can find me at Ross Jackson Nola, Nola, on all of your favorite social media. I think brand consistency is really important. So it's just one handle, no matter which platform you're on. So Ross Jackson Nola, you can find everything you're looking for there.
Check him out on YouTube at Locked On Saints, and check him out on WWL TV, as well as LouisianaSports.net. Ross, thank you for your time, brother. Had a great time with you. And we'll catch you next time we're in New Orleans together, brother. Have a good one.
Absolutely, buddy. Take care. Stay safe. Thanks for having me on.